Bet the Board.
What do you mean you don't bet? I mean, I don't bet. You know, I don't gamble. I don't. I never have, and I never will. Yeah, right. I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
You owe me 15 grand, pal.
Pay him. Pay that man his money.
It's the Bet the Board podcast.
God likes me. He really, really likes me.
In the end, I wound up right back where I started. I could still pick winners, and I could still make money for all kinds of people back home. And why mess up a good thing?
Here's Payne Insider and Todd Fuhrman.
Welcome into the Bet the Board podcast, powered by FanDuel, and this an annual tradition. Once a year, we record Bet the Board After Dark. I am your host, Todd Fuhrman, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and co-host, the one, the only Payne Insider. And Payne, this is kind of like the Bet the Board equivalent of Midnight Madness around here.
That's absolutely what's going on. I had to take a cold shower to keep me awake for this marathon podcast that we're about to venture our way into.
I mean, normally you're the one having to pull me out of bed when we record early in the morning on Monday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Tonight, I'm the one that has to keep you up well past your bedtime to try and dive through some of the biggest college football and NFL matchups that we'll get for this Thanksgiving holiday weekend.
Looking forward to it. I debated going with the adult beverage while we recorded. I chose not to. You decided to dive right in.
I did, but you know what the problem is? We spent so much time gabbing before the show even started, trying to get our ducks in a row, that I have about one sip left in my Molson Canadian right about now. So if you hear me go silent for 3 to 4 minutes, it means I had to go down to the fridge and grab another beer.
There you go.
So
I'm surprised you didn't refill as we were chatting beforehand.
I debated, but I wanted to make sure my thoughts were lucid. I was on top of things, because when I have to kick things off here, I mean, we want to know the real scoop, and there's nobody better connected to one particular college football program than you are. And Florida State's been in the news since Saturday for all the wrong reasons. Can you shed a little bit of light on why Dabo has such a hard-on for what transpired or didn't transpire in Tallahassee on Saturday?
The wrong reasons, he said. You're part of the national narrative.
No. I'm not part of any national narrative here. I want the straight scoop. Inquiring minds want to know. Clemson's pointing fingers. Florida State's pointing fingers. And for whatever reason, Dabo feels the need to double down on a rivalry that, quite frankly, as you know as well as I do, isn't poised to be a rivalry for at least 3 to 5, maybe 5 to 7 more years.
Very possible. That's the timeline. I have to tell you, I got about... I'm being conservative here. 25 emails at some point throughout Saturday and into Sunday morning about good call on them canceling the game, just from random people. I think there's probably a lot of fiction to this story. I truly believe that, and I know I joked around for weeks and about praying this game got canceled. But I can tell you, speaking to probably the largest booster who's never steered me wrong, and I believe he's 7 for 7 on information he sent me the last 4 years. And we even had one this past week where you sent me a note that said one quarterback was transferring, and I'm like, that doesn't even sound right. I think it might be an injury. So the information's been pretty pristine here. He said to me flat out, like, we can't afford to cancel games right now. Like, literally, Willie's buyout was $34 million. Florida State's a public school. Ticket sales have dwindled the last few seasons. Then you have COVID strike, and it's impacted finances at a time where they were pinching pennies anyway. If you remember, their AD basically wasn't even a football guy. He was just brought in to manage some money because they were looking so bleak financially. So Clemson is their largest revenue-generating game of the season. The idea that, right, one of the top programs with probably the best college quarterback of all time was going to make FSU look any worse perception-wise on a national scale than they already are right now it is pretty laughable. I think the reality of the situation, and I don't believe it was done intentionally at all, so I wouldn't kill Dabo for this either, but he had a player that was sick practice all week, and the player had symptoms at the beginning of the week, and I guess he was tested for COVID. Test came back negative. The player practiced the rest of the week, flew on the team plane, rode the bus. Then he's tested again and pops a positive. So the infected player had been around other players all week, and it makes sense that FSU's doctors didn't want to go on with this. And I'll be honest, the recent rash of scholarship players for Florida State moving on, from Terry to Blackman to Durden and Marvin Wilson being out for the season, they're getting close to the minimum scholarship player allotment to complete some of these games. One outbreak, and suddenly, you're losing games on the back end of the schedule that are at least winnable, that could get you to a respectable number of wins to maybe you're invited to a bowl game just based on namesake alone, which I think would be big for those guys. So, number one, FSU didn't duck the game as much as I personally wanted them to. I think number two, Dabo didn't practice this sick kid intentionally. And number three, to your point, is Dabo is being Dabo currently, which is a pretty big asshole in the handling of the situation. And I believe Mike Norvell even offered to pay for travel back to FSU for the game in December. So we'll see what comes of this. Dabo's at this spot right now.
Starting to chirp a little bit. He's starting to chirp a little.
He's on top of the mountain. And if you know Dabo, he's very opinionated about certain things. When he starts to get on these unhinged rants, it might not be the best thing for him, because some things could slip out that he probably wouldn't want to get out. So he kind of needs to pump the brakes a little bit and control himself, because he's kind of a wild dude, to be honest with you.
Be interesting to see how this ultimately takes shape. We'll see if the game does get played. Clemson, of course, in the college football playoff rankings, if the season were to play out like most expect, would be right back in the mix with a chance to win a national championship. I don't think any of us are bold enough to say that Florida State becomes a very potential upset candidate to knock Clemson from that particular perch. But hey, weirder things have happened, and we'll see how this situation does get resolved, hopefully sooner rather than later. But speaking of those college football playoff rankings, Payne, there weren't many surprises as far as the top four were concerned. Notre Dame slots in at number 2. They went out. They're obviously in. Alabama number 1, 93% chance to get in. Even with a loss to Florida in the SEC title game, I don't think Alabama's on the outside looking in. Clemson, we know what they'll have to do. Ohio State, assuming they run the table, they're in. And that's where things get interesting, trying to figure out what team could potentially slide in as a number 4, whether it's a one-loss A&M side, whether it's Northwestern, should they go undefeated and knock off Ohio State, or a variety of other scenarios that play out. But clearly the one team that has the biggest gripe, and it's not really a massive surprise to the casual fan when you look at their overall strength of schedule, despite what the game metrics tell you. BYU number 14, and Kalani Sitake had some pretty strong words, but the reality of it is BYU just doesn't have that resume-defining win, and ultimately I think that's the one thing that holds them back, although they've been in our Bet the Board top 10 pretty much since week 2 of the season.
So how happy are you?
I'm not. Hold on a second here.
Because you've been battling me on this for most of the season.
No. Don't you?
Publicly and privately.
Don't you try and spin this. I did take. Hold on. I did take shots at BYU on social media. I didn't get the full story about why the game against Washington didn't happen, that it wasn't guaranteed. And as we see, Washington looks like they're going to have to play Utah this weekend, so the Pac-12 stepped in. But when you send out your football program, we'll take on anybody, anytime, the old Pat Hill mantra when he was at Fresno State. You begin to prepare. You say, yeah, Washington, we'll play. We don't care if it's on an asphalt parking lot to try and get out there. And no, Washington isn't a top 5 or top 10 team, but at least it's a middle-of-the-pack Pac-12 side that you can go, hey, look, we won this game by 3 touchdowns. We avenged a game last year that we were absolutely blown out in Provo 45-19. So you can't shy away from any of those opportunities, because none of the elite programs are going to say, hey, yeah, BYU, we're going to come out to Provo because they canceled a conference game and give you a chance to build your resume.
That becomes the difficult part of all these G5 teams. Which Power 5 school that's in the running for a college playoff every single year is going to want to schedule these guys in a non-conference game when they can just play a directional school potentially in their own state and increase revenue for the state?
I mean, Washington did, though. Washington played them last year, went into Provo, I believe it was the second half of home and home, and beat their brains into the tune of a 20-plus point victory as a 7-point favorite.
Listen, to me, if you look at BYU, right, they scheduled 6 games against the Pac-12, Big Ten, and SEC this year.
Yeah, that's correct.
But those schools went conference only.
Yep.
So BYU scrambled to put this schedule together. And then they had 2 more games at Boise and Houston. Pretty solid competition there for an 8-game stretch in my mind. So I'm not sure how we can sit here and punish BYU for who they've played in a COVID year where COVID basically forced their 6 Power 5 games to be removed.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Is BYU a top 4 team in the country based on my power ratings? No. But there's a mix of power rating and accomplishment that I think we need to figure out, because if we're just going to put the 4 teams that recruit the best in the country as the 4 teams in the college football playoff every year,
which we pretty much do now already.
Right. It loses a lot of intrigue, and so, we're sitting here talking pre-show about a situation where Texas A&M could find their way into the college football playoff with 1 loss, and you can outline that scenario for us in a minute, because I kind of roughly forgot what it was. But I guess my point here is, at some juncture in time, we need to figure out how the elite G5 teams have a fighting shot to get in the college football playoff. And I don't want like this college basketball tournament style where we're inviting 70 teams in, but is the answer going to 8 teams? Because right now we're just not giving these teams a shot. And I understand that these teams don't recruit at the same levels, but there has to be some type of inclusion here. And in my mind, like, listen, I love Texas A&M. It was a team that we had power rated in the top 10. We thought they could make a national championship push this year before all the opt-outs. But my point here is we're probably sitting here and we're saying, well, we don't think Cincinnati's good enough to play in Alabama. We don't want a college football playoff game where there could be this blowout. I think the uniqueness of the matchup and a new team potentially playing a big boy is pretty exciting, as we'll figure out where they're at. The reality is Texas A&M already lost by 28 to Alabama. Could it be any worse if Cincinnati went in there and lost by 17?
No.
Like, it's to me, it's kind of the same thing. At some point, we need to give them a chance or figure out how to include the elite G5s, whether we go to 6 teams in the college football playoff. I don't know what it is, but there needs to be some way to finagle your way in there.
I'm with you. I don't think the system is perfect by any stretch of the imagination for just the reasons you outlined. It's the haves and the have-nots, and there's very little intrigue year in, year out in terms of who the top 2 or 3 teams are going to be. Sure, you get one team to come from off the pace or something along those lines, but the reality of it is what makes college athletics different than the pros, specifically the NBA, you do have a little bit more parity in Major League Baseball, the NFL to the lesser extent, and of course the hot goalie is a great equalizer in the NHL, is those runs of the VCUs and the George Masons, just getting there, having a chance to prove, hey, look, we can compete. And I know football's not the same by any stretch of the imagination as college basketball, but ultimately you want to see these teams at least get a crack, because when Boise State beat Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl, we can say what we want that, hey, Oklahoma wasn't as focused, but that was a defining moment in college football. It announced for Boise State that they could go into a game like that in a big bowl game, and it wasn't a massive upset. I think they were about a 7.5, 8-point dog, but prove on that stage it was a program-building win. And when you look at college football right now, yes, we call 130 some odd teams FBS, but it's really not. It's the Power 5 conferences are in one tier, and everybody else that just doesn't have a path to college football playoff relevance, because what, you get one team from a group of 5 conference that qualifies for a New Year's 6 bowl, and then people like myself, and I'll admit it, I'm as guilty as anybody else, go, you know what, LSU didn't want to be there against Central Florida, or Auburn didn't want to be there, Wisconsin didn't want to be there against Memphis because they weren't playing for something more meaningful. So by that token, it still tarnishes their accomplishments.
Absolutely. And you hit the perfect example there was Boise. If they don't win that game, they probably aren't the program they are today. And I think the other aspect of this is we'll probably see less ship jumping, right? If you had a coach like a Luke Fickell that knew he had the ability to potentially fight for the college football playoff every single season, he had a legitimate chance, he could be a Cincinnati lifer.
I mean,
my feeling is all these coaches that are in the G5 level, obviously financial things change and making more money is the end game, but you might have more loyalty to some of these programs, and you might be able to have some sustainability there if they knew they could actually achieve college football playoff status.
And I think when we talk about it, and it's a nice parallel because we're on the eve of college basketball kicking off, it's the reason that Mark Few hasn't left Gonzaga. Gonzaga plays nobody in the West Coast Conference. Sorry, St. Mary's. Sorry, BYU. Yes, those are typically tough road games when you go into McKeon Pavilion in Moraga, or you have to go into the Marriott Center in Provo once a year. But Gonzaga can get those games against elite programs programs. They'll kick things off with Kansas. They don't go into the kennel in Spokane, but you can play them on a neutral. Mark Few goes through and dusts all the conference opponents, but we've seen Gonzaga get 5-star recruits. You have a Florida transfer that's going to be eligible, and there's a reason they're the number 1 team in the country going in. You don't have the opportunity to even do that in college football because none of these teams can get games on a neutral. Cincinnati, the perfect illustration, as you mentioned. Yeah, they got a game against Ohio State, but they had to go to the shoe. Ohio State ain't going to Nippert Stadium or playing on a neutral anytime soon.
No, not at all. I guess the other thing that I saw floating around on social was if they're both undefeated and are a couple spots out, would BYU and Cincinnati dare schedule a game?
Oh, let them play. You have to make any calls. You'll play them anywhere you want. That game has to happen for those two teams if there's a chance they can bolster their resume.
If you're Cincinnati, I think there's probably more risk looking at the current rankings format. The idea was that they might decline and just roll the dice and hope that there was enough carnage up top for them to sneak in.
Ask UCF how that worked out for them.
Yeah, it's true. That's very true.
So it's interesting debate, and I'm glad we have a chance to talk about some of these topics. I know fans, hey, they're what makes the college sports world go around. They have a little bit more elite loyalty. They give a little bit more passion. But for us who kind of approach it as we don't give a damn what program it is. We just want to see the best teams play to create the most interesting matchups, allowing us to make money. Part of what we love about college basketball is the fact that Cinderella does have a chance. Sure, we don't want a 15 seed getting to the Final Four, but on the off chance it happens, we're going to watch the games. Ultimately, the cream rises to the top. College football, we just don't have a landscape or a format right now that even allows us to have that upset if a Cincinnati gets in as a 7 seed in the college football playoff, has a chance to take on Ohio State. And quite frankly, Payne, from what I saw from Ohio State this past weekend against Indiana, they sure as shit shouldn't want to play Cincinnati or any team that can match up a little bit physically or slow them down offensively with some of their issues on the offensive line and in their secondary.
That would be a hell of a matchup, that's for sure. I think we probably expand because the money situation makes sense to see some expansion to the college football playoff. I'm hoping it's just a 6, maybe 8 at the most. I truly don't want to see this in the basketball format where just everyone's in it, devalues the games throughout the season.
No, we don't need 24 like the FCS, and North Dakota State still wins the national championship every year. You're just kind of delaying the inevitable, but an expansion to 6 or 8 I think makes sense. And for all those college football purists out there who say it completely devalues the regular season, I beg to differ. If you can still get in with 1 loss, we're not talking about taking teams that finish 8-4 in conference having a chance to ultimately win a national championship. But we'll get to college football. For those new to this particular Thanksgiving week format, we cover a little bit of NFL, a little bit of college football. We get it all in. Encourage you folks to follow Payne on Twitter at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Fuhrman. You can follow me there as well. More importantly, though, follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. And Payne, format-wise, should we go day by day, kick things off with the Thanksgiving night game and roll into Friday, Saturday, Sunday, etc.?
Yeah, that's the perfect way to do this.
All right.
Let's just go rotation number. By day, we'll weave between NFL and college football, and we'll have timestamps for all the games, so it'll be easy enough for people to go directly to them if they prefer that method.
And for all the folks disappointed, no, we're not going to preview all the games on Thanksgiving. Houston and Detroit, plenty of injuries that make handicapping that game extremely difficult 36 hours before. The Washington football team in Dallas. Yeah, that's not going to quite crack our rotation. If it's up to me, we don't do an NFC East game the rest of the season until one of those teams actually makes the playoffs. So we may as well start things off on Thanksgiving night, a game you'll see, of course, on NBC with the Baltimore Ravens return trip to Pittsburgh. It's Pittsburgh, a 5.5-point favorite on FanDuel. Total on the game, 44.5. And Payne, this game, of course, making headlines for all the wrong reasons. In vintage 2020 form, the Ravens won't be at full speed for this particular contest because of players that have tested positive for COVID. Gus Edwards and Justice Hill will be filling in as the 1 and 2 backs. No Mark Ingram, no J.K. Dobbins, no Pernell McPhee. We'll see if this game ultimately gets played, but I don't think it's at all about the Ravens' ground game in this particular meeting or the Steelers' undefeated record. This has to be where Lamar can shine on a big stage, and it's got to happen with him throwing on early downs.
I completely agree. And you mentioned some of the guys that will be out for this game. Hearing there could potentially be a couple others. We'll see what materializes. I'm hearing we're close. If there were another couple guys that this game might not go on, would be a bad look for the NFL, but we'll see. Lamar at this point, has to be able to consistently throw. I truly believe that. And when you look at where he's been best this season, it's throwing on first down. 57% success rate on those first down throws for Baltimore this season. And if you look a season ago, 49% was their success rate on first down throws. That's a season in which Lamar wins MVP. It's a season where Baltimore's offense was the most efficient in the NFL. And so I've been saying this for over a month now. Lamar has been better throwing on first down this season in a lot of key categories as a whole. The Ravens' offense, 8% more successful year over year on these early down throws, yet Greg Roman is calling more running plays on first down than last season's for whatever reason. So, you even look last week against Tennessee. Lamar was successful in 67% of first down throws. Greg Roman decides to run it on nearly 65% of first downs in that game. This, to me, is on Baltimore's offense. We have to, I think, assume Baltimore's defense comes to play, puts on a similar performance as they did in the first matchup back in Week 8, or Baltimore has no shot. So at that point, we're assuming defense is good. It's got to be on the offense to step up. It's Lamar, basically, at this point. He needs to have a day passing, needs to hold on to the ball. That's the other thing. I mean, Baltimore drops that Week 8 game at home by 4. Lamar has 4 crucial turnovers. And you watched every snap of this. These aren't the turnovers that you have around midfield and you can lose field position if your defense gets a stop. No, it's a type of turnover that loses you the game, and Lamar had 4 of them.
Yep.
Throws the pick 6 to start the game. He has another interception that sets Pittsburgh's offense up at the Baltimore 21. And then he has 2 fumbles at the Steelers' 8-yard line. So just huge swings. Now, maybe Lamar can, get help on the ground again. That was where the first matchup was really decided. It was shocking to me. Baltimore ran it right down Pittsburgh's throat, 5.6 a carry, 57% success rate, had 6 explosives on the ground, 265 total rush yards. They ran the ball extremely well on first down. But you mentioned some of the guys that are out. It's probably not going to be realistic to repeat that now that you're down Dobbins and Ingram. You don't have Ronnie Staley or Nick Boyle to help in the ground game. It's why I've put really a lot of the emphasis on Lamar being able to throw and then cut down on the costly mistakes to have a fighting chance here.
You know what's interesting about the Steelers, and I'm not going to take anything away from a team that started 10-0. History doesn't lie that says the last remaining undefeated team has a well above average chance to get to the Super Bowl. You look at Pittsburgh's resume so far this season. They have 3 wins, Payne, against teams with winning records. Yes, they beat the Ravens by 4 points. They beat the Titans by 3 points, and they dominated the Cleveland Browns. That all came in a 3-week stretch. Other than that, you go through the teams that the Steelers have beaten, and it leaves a lot to be desired. Now, we knew it was going to take a little while for Big Ben to get on the same page as some of his young wide receivers. They appear to have solved that. But let's not kid ourselves. The key to beating Baltimore, what allowed Tennessee to come back last week, was their ability to run the football between the tackles with Derrick Henry, knowing that the Ravens didn't have Calais Campbell. They didn't have Brandon Williams, who will be out again. It looks like Calais Campbell will miss as well. And that they were dealing without Garrett Wolfe. Pittsburgh hasn't shown a desire to continue to stay committed to the ground game. Yes, James Conner had a big day against the Jaguars. Great, I tip my hat. But before that, they had more than 94 yards rushing in their previous 4 games. This, in my opinion, is on Mike Tomlin and company. You have to try and commit in the trenches, run the football against Baltimore, because if you're going to throw into that teeth of that Ravens defense, their secondary is the strength with all those injuries they have up front.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how they decide to attack Baltimore's defense. The one thing that we kind of talked about in the first game is that Baltimore loves the blitz. They love to send pressure, and Big Ben gets it out quicker than any quarterback in the NFL right now. 2.29 seconds he is taking to throw the football. And that kind of negates what Baltimore likes to do with sending blitz, sending pressure, playing man coverage. You can get it out on time. So that will be interesting to see how they navigate this, right? The receiving core is basically loaded. Deontay Johnson is thriving now that he's fully healthy. But I think you might want to see, James Conner get the ball a little bit more. We talked about the offensive line woes, though. Haven't been getting the push that they've had in years past. The O-line starting to get a little bit older. Their elite offensive line coach moved on to Denver. So we've seen that O-line regress a little bit. But to your point, certainly Pittsburgh is winning. They're winning convincing in some of these games. They're playing who's on the schedule. But if you look at who they're playing to this point, they've faced one of the 3 easiest schedules of offenses, one of the 3 easiest schedules of defenses. This is a step up in class, and I think when you saw this line initially open in that soft 3.5 range, it really indicated that as poorly as Baltimore's played, that they were going to be the side here. It'll be interesting to see inevitably how high this line gets. But I think if you're a pro bettor, you're saying, hey, let this thing continue to tick up. I'd certainly love to take a 7 here if I could. So we'll see what materializes with the market and how many guys inevitably end up out with COVID here. But I think the Ravens will be the side here.
Well, and the other thing about that, too, is before last weekend's game where Baltimore blew that double-digit lead at home against the Tennessee Titans and the Steelers beat the doors off of Jacksonville, you were seeing 2.5 as a look-ahead number at FanDuel. So it just gives you a little bit of perspective. And if you're running to bet the Steelers now, thinking you're getting an edge over the market with some of these COVID cases laying 5.5, you may want to think twice. One other final nugget on this particular game. When you look at the way this thing has gone historically, the last 6 games between these two teams, the underdog has covered in 9 of the last 10. So it speaks to how tightly contested these games have been, how the underdog mentality often works, and why more often than not, this season series seemingly becomes split. From the pro ranks, though, Payne, on Thursday night, into the college ranks we go, and one of the nation's most explosive offenses will be on full display against one of the nation's best defenses when Notre Dame goes rolling into Chapel Hill as a 5.5-point favorite. Total in the game sits at 66.5 at FanDuel. When you look at North Carolina, they've scored touchdowns on their opening possession in 6 of its 8 games. They've scored 40-plus points in 4 straight games with an incredibly balanced attack. Javonte Williams and Michael Carter both averaged 7 yards per carry and have more than 800 yards this season. I mean, I can go on and on. I mean, some of the metrics that I'm sure we'll get to for North Carolina are simply staggering. The big plays are going to be there, you would think, for the Tar Heels. I mean, I'm just trying to wrap my head around, can they get a single stop? But do you think they'll have as much success with their explosive plays in this game, Payne, against the Irish defense as they've had so far, given their schedule?
I don't think North Carolina is getting many stops defensively. Even with Notre Dame down a couple offensive linemen, I think the Irish are going to have some success running the ball and keeping Ian Book clean when he throws. If you look at North Carolina defensively, 110th in the country in defensive line yards, 120th in stuff rate. Kyron Williams should have success. In the 2 games where North Carolina has faced their top 2 offenses on the schedule, they've allowed 10 yards per play and 8.8 yards per play. So I think you hit this perfectly. The largest key factor for me and for UNC to keep this within the number, maybe try and win it outright, is relying on the offense. That's UNC's team strength. The area where Notre Dame has been vulnerable defensively is where UNC is elite offensively, and that is with the explosive play. If UNC doesn't gash Notre Dame for chunk plays and explosive plays over the top, this won't end well. And we've broken down a bunch of Notre Dame games this season. They are vulnerable to the big play over the top in the passing game. If you look right now, Notre Dame 51st in the country in explosive pass defense. The Irish have allowed an explosive pass rate of more than 14%. We know Phil Longo, North Carolina's offensive coordinator, he likes to take deep shots, likes to push the ball down the field. Right now, when Sam Howell throws the ball, 18% of the time, it's 20 or more yards downfield. North Carolina's 6th in the country in explosive pass offense. And what's intriguing about this a little bit, I was thinking, I was writing my notes out. I remember us talking earlier in the year, if my memory serves correct. UNC didn't have a single explosive pass against Syracuse in the opener?
Yep.
I'm pretty sure.
Yep, they had struggled, and we talked about, I don't remember if it was Daz Newsome or De'Ami Brown, and we said, when are these guys going to show up? Because the passing game really was non-existent for the better part of, 3 quarters until they kind of woke up in the 4th quarter and found a way to cover that opener.
They woke up. and the other area where UNC's offense has been electric is with the explosive runs. You mentioned 2 backs averaging 7+ yards a carry. Michael Carter, Javonte Williams, they've been dynamic. They aren't just efficient runners, but they hit home runs. North Carolina 2nd in the country in explosive runs. And I know Notre Dame's defensive line has been like Fort Knox trying to crack that. 3rd in line yards, number 1 stuff rate. Notre Dame goes out, they hold Travis Etienne to less than 1.8 yards a carry. But Notre Dame has been prone to giving up some explosive runs as well. 56th in the country in explosive run defense. So bottom line here for this game, UNC has to chunk and big play their way to victory. It's their only shot. If UNC can hit the big momentum plays, do it early on, I think they might have a fighting chance here. If not, probably going to get a little bit ugly.
You know, it's interesting because Notre Dame, and you read some of the quotes leading up to this game, all the players and some of the beat writers that follow this program a lot closer than we do have said that Clark Lee, much like Bill Belichick, likes to take away what you do best. When you're devising a game plan against North Carolina, I mean, you have to trust your defensive line to make them one-dimensional. But I was blown away as we talk about UNC's explosive offense and haven't gone through and counted or tried to see highlights. But the Tar Heels have 181 plays this season, Payne, of 10 yards or more, 105 passing, 76 rushing. When you look at some of these metrics, they just jump off the page. First in plays per point in the ACC, first in points per minute, first in second down efficiency, first in big play offense, 22% of their plays. And when you look at ACC ranks, second in points per game, first in yards per game, first in yards per play, where, by the way, they're +2 net yards per play. And they've had 46 touchdowns this season. But the two games where they weren't able to get wins, Virginia and Virginia Tech, what was the common denominator? They didn't eclipse 100 yards rushing. So if you're the Irish, I think you have to sell out, stop the run, and go, Sam Howell, you better pull your best DJ impression and try and throw for 500.
We'll see if he can do that. The one area where he's been pretty good is under pressure. So if the offensive line doesn't hold up, I think Sam Howell has done a pretty good job with the heat on. 112 passer rating under pressure, 64% adjusted completion percentage. So he's done a good job there under pressure. The other thing, if you look at some of his metrics, he's gotten better as the game goes on. Really good in the fourth quarter. I think UNC, if they can get to the fourth quarter and keep this a one-score game, the way Sam Howell's been playing in that last stanza, it could bode well for them.
I mean, it sounds ridiculous to say because we don't do hyperbole more often than not, but if Sam Howell goes out there and performs at a high level, his draft stock goes through the roof. In a game like this where you have a number 2 team coming into your building, you can go out there, play loose and free as nearly a touchdown underdog. So should be a great watch and clearly the highlight of what we'll see college football-wise on Friday. But as we move to Saturday, and full disclosure here, I fought Payne tooth and nail to keep us from even discussing this game on the podcast because I didn't think either one of these programs deserved our respect given the product that they've put on the field. Payne, of course, won out there with a presidential veto of sorts. So Michigan is a 2.5-point favorite. Well, they'll welcome in a winless, both straight up and against the spread, Penn State side. And you're looking at a total here of 58.5 on FanDuel. Payne, what the hell is wrong with these two teams?
There was a recount, I believe, is what I went on.
Yeah.
And that's why we're discussing
this is why we don't do podcasts after dark, and this is why we don't let you drink before you come on air.
I chose not to drink. I was debating. I haven't been drinking recently. I don't know what's going on.
That's gonna change.
Tomorrow and
you got
Thursday.
quality time with the family coming up. We know there's a couple Tito's on the rocks coming on Wednesday and Thursday.
It's very possible. Listen, I think we can probably use the excuse of the pandemic, and a lot of people are going to think like everyone's dealing with that. But it's a little different if you're a blue blood with really high expectations and suddenly you're not playing for anything because of a few early losses. I just think it's different this season. And really what we're seeing, if I'm looking at Penn State and Michigan, and I've watched a lot of their football, neither of them have cared or played with effort every single game. Now, I know it was Rutgers, but at least Michigan decided to fight back last week. They could have easily packed it in after trailing early. But past that, you have two teams, I think, with serious question marks at quarterback. You have two defenses that are really struggling. For Michigan specifically, I get it, they're a blue blood. But, I mean, past what we know, that Harbaugh is really meddling and two hands on and can really wear on you, and it's why he fizzled out with the 49ers, and everyone thought, well, it can work in college since guys move on every 3 or 4 years. You won't have time to wear on players. Past those things, like there isn't a ton of talent here. Like Michigan's 2020 recruiting class was 14th. 2018, it was 22nd. So Michigan's getting good players, but Harbaugh isn't recruiting at a Bama or Ohio State or a Clemson or Georgia level. And honestly, Harbaugh isn't coaching these guys up. And I think we've talked about this for a little bit. Every year we've done a college football podcast. The offense was from the Stone Age. Finally, that's changing a little bit. Don Brown, good defensive coach. He's 65, though. It doesn't seem like he wants to adapt to style. He doesn't seem to care that, he's trying to play downhill. He's trying to play this aggressive style of defense. He doesn't have the players. Can't rush the passer. Can't play in man coverage. And that's what he's wanting to do. That style just isn't going to work. So basically what we are seeing here is Michigan isn't recruiting to the level that people think they do. And between Harbaugh and Don Brown, they've been reluctant to change things for virtually their entire existence in Michigan. I mean, how many years have we watched Don Brown against Ohio State continue to try to play man and just get slaughtered by crossing routes?
The shallow cross, the bane of Michigan's existence every year against Ohio State.
I mean, they just don't adapt. And again, the recruiting isn't at the level everyone thinks it is. So that's really what's going on with Michigan here. And Penn State, I think it's a little bit different. I mean, they just don't have a quarterback. They lost a couple key cogs at running back. You know, they lose their top receiver. Freiermuth goes down last week. He's going to be out for the season. You lose Micah Parsons. And again, it's another team that was expected to perform well this season. You're 0-5. And now there's, just kind of going through the motions and get out of Dodge this season. I don't know if we want to look at this game and maybe break down what's important, but do it quickly. Up to you. Your call.
I'd rather not, unless you have something that you really want to share about this particular game. I will say, when you look at the market, you have seen some money for Penn State, and one of their biggest issues has been turnover margin, where they're -9, and that's everything you read in handicapping this or trying to get an early read. We need more consistency. Our quarterbacks have to be better with the football. And even last week, when they started to battle back against Iowa after digging themselves a massive hole, Sean Clifford comes in for Levis and throws a costly pick six, which zaps all momentum. And it seems like rinse and repeat for Penn State. One of these games, they're not going to turn the ball over 37 times. And when that ultimately happens, they're going to not only cover, but they're going to win straight up. Maybe it happened this week. But if you had a key factor that you think is worth dissecting, I'm not going to make all your homework go out the window.
I did see the play where it looked like he just threw it to the defensive lineman for Iowa. It was like a nice little soft pass to the out. I don't know, but you're right. There's a lot of turnovers going on. I think this comes down to just poking at some of these metrics, like which offense can win through the air. Because passing, relatively speaking, has been the best part of both Penn State and Michigan's offenses, and pass defense has been far and away the worst part of both these defenses. It doesn't appear like Penn State's named the starting quarterback. But
they're going to play
whether
both.
It's
they're going to play both. I mean, I think you have to go in and operate under the assumption that both of those two knuckleheads are going to get meaningful reps.
That's what it looks like, because I looked at the depth chart and it said Will Levis or Sean Clifford. So I think it's probably both. PSU, I think, should have success throwing it. Penn State, hasn't lit the world on the fire through the air, but they are 53rd in passing success rate, 42nd in explosive passing, and you're looking at a Don Brown secondary that's 111th in the country in EPA pass defense for Michigan. And if you flip it around to the other side, and while we don't think Joe Milton is some fantastic quarterback, I think we even laughed and warned people that Joe Milton wasn't Cam Newton, despite the size and other similar attributes. And I just thought that was nonsense. But if you look, I don't know what's happened to Penn State's secondary, but PSU 90th in passing success rate allowed, 69th in explosive pass defense. You put it all together. Penn State is 105th in the country in EPA pass defense. So Joe Milton in the pass game, top 50 in both passing success rate and explosive pass offense. So I think the key to this game is figuring out which quarterback and aerial attack is going to have the most success here without turning the football over. And to your point, Penn State has taken some early money, actually saw it come in. So at 3, it appears as though Penn State is a sharp side.
I bet those Penn State fans never thought they'd long for Trace McSorley under center to give them some stability at the quarterback position. Be thankful for what you have, because you won't realize what you've got until it's gone. There you go. That's my deep thoughts as it pertains to the quarterback situation.
I feel like that's the beer talking, and it sounds like something that transpired in college or potentially high school that's left you a little scarred.
Yeah, in fact, I don't have another cold beer sitting on my desk right now is what let me a little cold and scarred at this point. But from two teams that haven't shown much of anything to two teams, Payne, that I think are obviously on the come. One is clearly arrived, as we know, as a college football blue blood. The other one is a program we talked about last year and said you might want to buy stock in them now before it starts to get too trendy, and that would be the West Virginia Mountaineers. When you look at this game here, Oklahoma, fresh off their dominant performance against Oklahoma State, will go on the road to Morgantown as a double-digit favorite. 10.5-point chalk at FanDuel. Total on the game sits at 54.5. When you look at West Virginia, last 13 games they've played in their own building, they've compiled a 9-4 against the spread record. And clearly, West Virginia's defense, one of the most unheralded groups in the entire country. But going up against Oklahoma, having a good defense is one thing. Lincoln Riley and Spencer Rattler are going to find a way to break through. Does West Virginia have even a semblance of the firepower required to keep this game competitive?
Big game for us last week. Thank God for that.
I didn't watch a single play in the second half, by the way. Not a single play.
I know.
I was so frustrated with the way the first quarter went.
That was a wild first quarter. A lot of unfortunate things had to unfold there, especially in the first half. The interception that wasn't an interception that led to a short field touchdown. You had an Oklahoma defender lose his mind after getting a stop, which put an extra 4 points on the board. And then late in that game, the live total was 53. Lincoln Riley decided to call timeout, take a deep shot on 4th and 4 there, and there's a broken coverage against a very veteran-laden secondary. You got to stop there, and there's no sweat. We had to sweat that one out a little bit. Should have been much easier.
Should have doubled down at halftime, but
yes, halftime, second half was very sharp. The under. So when we decided to kind of like branch out and cover more territory for this podcast and go one key factor for each game as opposed to these deep dives on just a couple games, you hit this perfectly. I think our goal is to find an area of the game that's not obvious. And I think everyone knows like Lincoln Riley and the Sooners offense against West Virginia's defense is the best part of this matchup. And, I'm looking forward to that cat and mouse game. But West Virginia can't win this game if their defense doesn't show up, right? It's a requirement to even think about staying within this number and being competitive. West Virginia's defense to this point, you hit it on the head. They've been elite. Second in passing success rate defense, 16th in explosive pass defense, 7th in EPA pass defense. If you compare Spencer Rattler and Oklahoma's offensive metrics side by side to West Virginia's defensive metrics, like mirror images of each other. So, again, West Virginia's defense has to show up for anything else to matter in this game. So, to me, the key factor is, one, you kind of have to assume they show up, but the other side of the ball is West Virginia's offense. That's going to be the key to getting them over the top, specifically Jared Dagey in the pass game. That has to be, there so the defense isn't forced to defend short fields against an elite Oklahoma offense. Jared Dagey to this point has been pretty efficient down to down. And I know he doesn't have the strongest arm. Sometimes it's tough watching him throw the ball from the far hash across the field. But he's been pretty good, having some efficiency. You're looking right now, there isn't a lot of pop in the pass game, but over 45% of passes are graded successful. It's 35th in the country. Again, he doesn't have the best arm, but 81% adjusted completion percentage when the offensive line keeps Dagey clean and he isn't pressured. The other area where you could see a big play or two is in the ground game. West Virginia does a really, really poor job moving people in the trenches, 113th in the country in line yards. Much better pass protecting offensive line than run blocking. But Letty Brown is very good back. I think he's one of the most underrated backs in the country. So don't expect a lot of down-to-down rushing efficiency. But West Virginia, top 50 in explosive runs. If Letty Brown can pop a big one or two, that should help. And if you're looking at an area where Alex Grinch's defense has been most susceptible this year, it's actually the explosive run. So the key here is Seth Dagey has to continue to be efficient down to down. Letty Brown has to pop a big run or two. And West Virginia's defense has to be as good as advertised, stepping up in class. You would also have to give West Virginia the situational edge here, I'd think. 2 weeks to prepare for the Sooners with, Oklahoma coming off their Bedlam rivalry game a week ago.
Do you worry at all as far as, looking at a side and total? I mean, I know this under has taken a shade of money from 55.5 down to 54.5. Do you think West Virginia looks to try and hit the big play and empty the tank early, or do you think they're more than comfortable with that methodical style, knowing that their defensive line could have a chance to be one of the best that Oklahoma will face all year, that Neil Brown, he made a living at Troy doing the basics and making sure his team didn't beat itself. But I wonder if West Virginia is going to have to go deep into the playbook to try and find that home run early and get some of that momentum and play with a lead.
I mean, I think you're going to pull out all the stops, right? Some end arounds, maybe a trick play or two or a throwback. But I do think in nature of who they are, it is this efficient, short to intermediate passing game. We mentioned Jarrett Dagey's arm. It's you'll watch this game and you'll understand what I'm saying if you're a listener. It's not the best arm. So the idea that they can throw deep and hit a ton of explosives, that's just not their game. Now, maybe there's a blown coverage or two, or there's a missed assignment where, an intermediate pass turns into something explosive. That's certainly possible. But in terms of having Daggy go out there and just launch missiles deep, that's not going to work here.
Yeah, and speaking of which, it'll be very interesting to see exactly, what you get from these two teams and how they go about attacking in space in this particular contest. Last but not least, an Iron Bowl rivalry that probably shouldn't be much of one on paper, at least this season, where Auburn finds themselves massive underdogs heading into Tuscaloosa, catching 24.5 points to be precise. Total in this game, 62.5 at FanDuel, shaded to the under. When you look at Alabama, people go, oh, it's a rivalry game, they're close. Well, no, it hasn't been the case. When Alabama's been this heavy a favorite in the Iron Bowl, they've gone out there and they've dominated their in-state rival. Mac Jones' Heisman candidacy has taken a little bit of a hit in recent weeks. Kyle Trask has moved to the catbird seat, so don't think that'll be lost on Nick Saban, who isn't one for individual accolades, but I'm sure it doesn't hurt recruiting if you can bring Heisman trophies as far as the quarterback's concerned. And Payne, when you look at Bo Nix, we know the knock on him is that he's not the same quarterback home and road. So far this season at home, he's got an 85 QBR, 65% completion percentage, 8 touchdown, 1 interception. Auburn's 4-0. When he goes out on the road, 62 QBR, 58%, 2 touchdowns, 4 picks, 1-2 record. Stat line very misleading last week against Tennessee, as the Auburn defense was ill-equipped to stop the Vols doing much of anything. Much like West Virginia, Oklahoma, we know that Alabama is going to get their points. What does Auburn have to do to keep this game inside the number?
Yeah, Auburn is not getting stops in this game. It's going to be a long, long day for Kevin Steele. Alabama is going to be able to do whatever they want offensively. They'll be able to run it. They'll be able to pass it. So to keep it within this number, it is on Chad Morris. It is on Bo Nix to have a more competent offense. You hit it perfectly. The Bo Nix performances on the road in his 1.5+ seasons at Auburn, it has been a glaring problem. The home road dichotomy is massive, not just this season, but last year as well. But the first thing offensively is Tanks Bigsby. He's got to be able to provide some balance. We've seen against good opponents, specifically the Georgia game in the first half, before they decided not to run it in the second half for whatever reason. Alabama has struggled to defend some inside zone runs this season. Alabama hasn't been great along the defensive line either. Havoc rate is down, 67th in line yards, 84th in stuff rate. And that decrease in production is why Alabama right now 47th in the country in EPA per rush allowed. So Bigsby and the Auburn O-line are going to have to create some punch on the ground. And then it's on Bo Nix. He needs to be more accurate. He's going to have to use his legs in a game like this. He'll have to be better on the run and under pressure. And that's, I think, what this game comes down to. Because if you look right now where Bo Nix's shortcomings are, and it's pretty shocking considering that he is mobile, but the two areas where he's really struggled, which could come into play here despite Alabama not getting pressure at usual Alabama rates, is when Nix is under pressure and when he's throwing on the move. Those two areas he needs to be accurate in. He needs to limit the mistakes. Under pressure, Bo Nix has a 27 passer rating. You potentially have one that's better from your couch right now, sipping your
That's
beer.
not true. That's not true. When I throw a ball, there's a good chance something's going to get broken in my upstairs when I try and play catch with a dog.
Completing 38% of his passes under pressure. Bo Nix has 0 touchdowns, 3 picks with the heat on. If you look when Bo Nix is on the move and he's throwing from outside the pocket, only 45% of those throws have been on target. 32 of 59 throws from outside the pocket have been off target. Inconceivable. So Auburn's offensive line, I think, is going to have to hold up. Allow Bo Nix to be a pocket passer, throwing from a clean pocket. He's been a different quarterback when that happens. Rating shoots up to 106, has an adjusted accuracy percentage of 76%, throwing from the clean pocket. It allows Chad Morris, I think, to be better manufacturing the game for Bo and the rest of the offense if he can rely on the O-line to protect Bo. As it is right now, over 50% of Bo Nix's throws come with play action or an RPO element to them. So that's important that he's able to stay in the pocket, not be running for his life. If that's the case, Chad Morris will use more of those manufactured things which help an offense, and specifically Bo Nix. But Auburn's going to have to put up points here, bottom line. So Tank's got to get going on the ground. The O-line needs to keep Nix clean and comfortable. And if that happens, maybe Auburn can score enough to stay within the 25 because they are not getting stops.
Has Alabama figured anything out defensively, in your opinion? I know what the score lines say. They've allowed 2 points in their 3 points in their last 2 games, 20 points over their last 3 games. And it's a defense that ever since Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss did whatever they wanted when they wanted against them has been significantly better. But I do have some questions about the strength of schedule and opposing offenses they faced.
Yeah, you're spot on with this. So the first thing I will say is a lot of the metrics are still very poor. This is certainly not an Alabama defense that we've grown accustomed to. The talent simply isn't there right now. You have other teams that are recruiting really well. You know, Georgia's coming on, obviously. We know what they're doing, recruiting defensive players. Ohio State, Clemson. So the talent, the depth isn't there on that side of the ball. What I have seen, though, since the Georgia game in the second half is Alabama has done a fantastic job, specifically Nick Saban, making adjustments. Alabama's defense right now, number 1 in second half success rate allowed, number 1 in second half havoc rate allowed since the Georgia game. So the adjustments being made along with the lesser competition, over the last 3-4 games, as you alluded to, have at least yielded some improvements on that side of the ball.
Hey, Alabama, we know, number 1 team in the country, power rate just the same way, and are obviously going to be a force in ultimately determining who is crowned college football national champion. From Saturday, though, in a bevy of rivalry games in the college football world, into some impactful contests that we'll see unfold in the National Football League on Sunday, and one of which is a showdown for 2 teams and a de facto tie atop the AFC South, the Tennessee Titans and Indianapolis Colts. It's the Colts, a 3.5-point favorite at FanDuel. Total in this game, 50.5, Payne. And Frank Reich, well, last weekend he continued his wizardry as a short favorite, now moving to 12-1 straight up as the Colts head coach, 11-1-1 against the spread as a favorite of 4 points or less. They'll fall into that particular range here. We have seen some money come in early on the Titans. Home revenge in a divisional matchup for the Titans in the first meeting. The Colts outgained them 430-294, a game where they trailed going into the half and dominated after the break. We know the Titans' DNA is establishing the ground game. It paid dividends last week with Derrick Henry, but do they need to do something different to get a Tiger to change its stripe to attack this Colts defense come Sunday?
I think so. And we saw Tennessee and Indy play on a short week Thursday night game back in week 10. So we're literally, 2 handfuls of days removed from the last time these teams have played. And I think we spent probably 10, 15, maybe even 20 minutes breaking that game down. In my mind, nothing has changed from that breakdown. In fact, I will double down and say the things that I mentioned then are even more important and prevalent now. Arthur Smith and the Titans offense have to break tendency to beat the Colts. And you would think, Todd, right? Like, Vrabel's lost 4 or 5 games to the Colts since he's been in Tennessee. Self-scout. See what's gone wrong, maybe try to change some things. And I fully understand who the Titans are, who they want to be, and the way they want to play. But Arthur Smith has got to change the way he calls plays. It's far too predictable. You go back to that Week 10 game. Very opening drive against Indy, and Arthur Smith calls 3 passes. Yeah. Yep, 3 passes on 4 first downs. Titans average almost 10 yards per pass and a touchdown on those first down passes from the opening script. And I was shocked. I was like, wow, somebody got to Arthur Smith. But once the script wore off, it was back to normal. Tennessee was 60% run on first down for the entire game. But in the second half, where Indy won on the scoreboard 21-0, the Titans literally trailed by double digits heading to the fourth quarter. Somehow the Titans were 73% run on first down in the second half. Arthur Smith just kept running, and sure enough, Titans scored 0 points in the second half. So, when you look at the Titans offense and you look at this matchup specific, to the Colts defense, I think you have to let Ryan Tannehill throw a little bit more. Tennessee's offense to this point, 6% more successful throwing on first down than running this season. Trending data, First 6 weeks, Titans offense was number 1 in passing success rate, 4th in rushing success rate. From week 7 on, though, Titans are 22nd in both rushing and passing success rate. It's the predictability on early downs. It's caught up to them. Defenses are cognizant of what's happening. That predictability is leading to longer down and distances on third down where Ryan Tannehill isn't as comfortable. And you go back to this matchup specifically against the Colts defense, Indy's 3rd in the league defending first down runs, but they're 24th in success rate defending first down passes. I think we say this all the time. Good coaches look at their opponent and scheme to attack the weakness. Bad coaches, or coaches that aren't as successful, put their hands back, flip them up, and be like, hey, we're going to do what we do. And it just doesn't seem to work. I think I've banged the table, too, about this, is that the Colts defense probably not as good as some of the surface level metrics would indicate. And I still believe that now more than ever. Indy had faced the easiest schedule of offenses prior to last week. The quarterbacks Indy had faced were bottom of the barrel. And I know Ryan Tannehill isn't Aaron Rodgers, but the Titans just paid the guy $118 million. Like, you got to let him throw. And if you look last week, Aaron Rodgers in the first half threw on first down 14 times. Packers averaged 9.1 a pass, 79% success rate, had 3 explosive passes and 2 touchdowns. When Green Bay passed on first down the first 3 quarters, 8.7 yards per pass, 73% success rate. It's clear Green Bay didn't believe in the Colts metrics either, right? And they just came out and said, hey, we're going to pass on early downs. And I think the other reason here that Tennessee needs to be less predictable on first down, throw a little bit more, your goal should always be to build the lead. But this week specifically, because Phillip Rivers is dealing with a toe issue. He was hobbling around late in that game against Green Bay. He flat out said Monday at the presser that his toe was really sore when he was asked about it. Build the lead, I think. Make Phillip Rivers, it's not 100%, throw to beat you.
Do you think that's part of the reason that we've seen money come in on the Titans early on in this week?
I do.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, you bring that point up, and there's no doubt that the Colts, I have to think, were pretty fortunate after their ineptitude to run the clock out late in that game, thinking, hey, look, we may actually have to put together a drive in overtime to win this game. The defense, of course, gets the fumble from Marquez Valdez-Scantling. And to the Colts' credit, they did get the ground game on track, whereas dynamic, and we talked a little bit going into that game that, hey, look, this team weaponry-wise is a lot better than people give them credit for, and we saw Michael Pittman on full display. We saw their trio of tight ends all get in the action. And, hey, look, Jonathan Taylor no longer on a milk carton was very much relevant in that second half with 72 yards rushing. I think going to be a fascinating game here because I do agree with your point that a lot more could be asked of this Colts defense than what was required the first time around against the Titans.
When we broke down that game last week, I said I think the Colts will have a chance to run the ball a little bit here, even though they've been horrific doing it. And the other area that we outlined was get the ball to running backs and tight ends out of the backfield. And they had real success doing that last week. And I think, we've seen the offense for the Colts branch out a little bit. They were initially injured a lot on that side of the ball. And now they're getting much healthier. Michael Pittman is developing into that number 1 receiver. T.Y. Hilton, now that he's a little bit healthier, maybe he'll be a fine number 2. But you have to like some of the weapons with Mo Alley Cox. I know he had the costly fumble early in that game, but you have Trey Burton as well. We've talked about the chemistry there with Phillip Rivers. It was his favorite target out of camp. That seems to have materialized, moving forward into the season. You have a couple backs. They're all not the best, but they do things really well. And so I think the pieces are coming along offensively. It sucks that it looks like Phillip Rivers is a little bit hindered, but he's one of the toughest guys in the league. There's no doubt about that. And when you look at Tennessee, they don't bring pressure very often. And the one thing that we did say in the Thursday night contest was that the Colts have been able to pass the ball all over every single defense that isn't top 5 in defensive efficiency. And so that's one thing, aside from revenge, aside from this being a big division game and having playoff implications and 4 being a big number, it is that the area where Indy was able to attack the Titans in the first game was through the air. And right now the Colts are number 1 in the NFL in passing success rate if you exclude the 2 games against the top 5 defenses. So if Philip Rivers isn't 100%, that could be a big blow to this offense.
Jacoby Brissett time. Get him out there. Let him start chucking the ball around the yard. I love to see him in short yardage situations last week. Brought me back to the glory days of handicapping the CFL.
I don't. I prefer Philip Rivers being 100% healthy and shoving it up everyone's ass who doubted him.
It'll be interesting to see.
Get him into the playoffs,
exactly.
baby.
Just get healthy, and the Colts got a shot to really do a little bit of damage as a dark horse in the AFC. But to ultimately...
I will ask you this, though.
Away.
We're getting to that age where we are now seeing players' entire career, right? We would see them in college, and we see them in the NFL, and we see their entire NFL career.
It's kind of demoralizing.
It is, but now we are getting to the point where the younger generation thinks like Philip Rivers and Adrian Peterson are absolutely horrific players because this is what they're getting to witness right now. Were we like that?
I think so.
As kids, I don't remember us doing that.
There's no doubt about it. I can't really remember Joe Montana in his prime. I remember Joe Montana out there in mop-up duty as a member of the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, you see highlights, and you may as well think of it 60, 70 years ago when he finds Jonathan Taylor against the Cincinnati Bengals in that particular Super Bowl. So I think everybody has a little bit of that, and it's one of the things that, I'm sure your dad said to you and my dad said to me, that appreciate it while you see it. And when you're younger, you go, whatever, you're being an old crotchety man. And now we begin to see some of those same things.
Dressed up as Boomer Esiason one year for Halloween.
How'd that work out for you? Did you choke on the biggest stage?
I was a big Icky Woods fan at the time.
I could see that. You know what? If your family happens to have video footage on the old, camcorders of you doing the Icky Shuffle, that would be great. And I think that could go viral on social media. So can you reach out to your mom, dad, maybe even your sister, and see if they have that?
Unlikely.
It's worth a shot. One day you'll peel back the curtain of mystery, and we'll see Payne doing the Icky Shuffle along the way. We talked about the Colts and where their playoff prospects look in the AFC. Of course, the top dog still remains, despite being one game behind the Steelers, the Kansas City Chiefs. And we saw their offense in all of its glory on Sunday Night Football against the Las Vegas Raiders. The defense left a little bit to be desired. There's no doubt about that, as Derek Carr and company went up and down the field for the better part of 3.5 quarters. But I don't want to focus on the Chiefs. I want to focus more for this game, Payne, on what the hell is wrong with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Because anyone who watched Monday Night Football against the Rams, I know what the final score said, 27-24, but that game never felt all that competitive by any stretch of the imagination. And when you have all the weapons that Tom Brady and this Bucs offense have, they're meaningless when you can only operate in a 15 to 20-yard window. And that leads me to my analogy I use, which you'll make fun of me for. It's like buying a Maserati but only driving it in a school zone because you can't put the pedal to the metal because you just don't have the capabilities. That's what I feel like watching this Tampa offense operate.
They also break down pretty frequently.
Well, that's maybe fitting as well, because it looks like Tom Brady is a broken down old man from series to series sometimes.
So your point is valid, right? When you look at what Kansas City is doing offensively right now, and you see this total at 56, which got hit up from the open of 54 by a very respected group through the key number 55, it's painting the picture that the Chiefs are going to get their points. And Tampa's defense isn't quite in form right now, especially in coverage. And I think we made a point to emphasize this coming into the season, that Tampa's secondary was going to be tested more in 2020 because of game flow, right? Tampa would be in the lead or in more neutral game situations this season than last year, and the secondary would have to defend more passes. And I think we even mentioned Todd Bowles said during camp that the youngest secondary in the league, guys were playing like puppies and not dogs. So I don't think that's going to change in six days. I wouldn't think, against Patty Mahomes and Andy Reid, especially with Mecole Hardman likely to have a larger role now that he's feeling better. So you hit this perfectly. This is, to me, about the Buccaneers offense attempting to keep up. Bruce Arians came out last night and then doubled down again this morning, saying he wasn't taking over play calling duties away from Byron Leftwich. We'll see how long that lasts. I haven't been overly impressed with what Leftwich has done, and I get the offense doesn't have a ton of chemistry right now, and you're mixing and matching and meshing all these new parts and trying to keep them all happy at the same time, which is tough. And I think we've talked about Tampa not having an identity yet, but what I am seeing with my eyes and then looking at some of the metrics is too much first down running with very little success, or deep bombs that don't have a prayer to be completed, especially the last handful of games. There doesn't seem to be this middle ground where you can have the short to intermediate pass game that Brady was so efficient with and executing in New England. Right now, Byron Leftwich is calling runs on 54% of first downs, and the Bucs are 7% below league average in success rate on those runs. So they're getting backed up. And then you're looking at the Bucs offensive line. They haven't been consistent, but they're not what people are making them out to be, that they're this like horrific unit. They're actually 12th in pass block win rate, so above average there. Brady's only been pressured on 26% of his dropbacks. That's below league average. But that's mostly because Brady's getting the ball out quick. And that's where it looks like, to me, the timing and the chemistry is a little off. Brady's throwing the ball on average of 2.6 seconds, 8th quickest in the league, yet Brady's average intended pass yards are traveling 9 yards, 8th furthest. So it's tough to have this great rhythm and timing with new receivers when you're getting the ball away quickly but throwing it deep. And you can see it. Brady's like not allowing the play to develop sometimes, like before he's launching it down the field and overthrowing guys, which is causing a lot of these turnovers. This will be, another big test against Chiefs secondary. And we've talked about Casey's back end. We have probably been the first people, I would say, last year to say, hey, this unit is really damn good. It's not going quite as well as last season, but Casey's still 10th in defensive pass efficiency. They're top 5 defending early down passes in terms of success rate. But I think what we need to see is the short to intermediate pass game from Tampa. Get things going over the middle of the field. That's where the Chiefs have their largest struggles defending passes. If you look on short to intermediate throws over the middle, so basically between the hashes in the 0 to 14 yard area, Kansas City's defense allowing a 116 passer rating on those throws. So get Godwin, get Gronk, AB running these short to intermediate routes, let Brady get comfortable. I think if Leftwich is going to be stubborn and be run heavy on first down, the Bucs have to increase the efficiency, obviously. We know the Chiefs struggle. Stop the run, 30th in defensive rush efficiency. But I think there is, some opportunity here to find guys open over the middle of the field, get the short to intermediate pass game rolling. I think we'll see a little bit different of a Bucs offense if that happens. Now, Casey's done pretty well pressuring quarterbacks. They're 6th in pressure rate to this point in the season. But I think if you get the ball out quickly and kind of shorten these passes down, we're going to see a little bit of a different Bucs offense. I think there's also, Todd, a little fun game within the game here. Spags is the guy who devised the game plan in 2008 as the Giants defensive coordinator that held Brady in check and allowed the New York Giants to win that Super Bowl. So typically Spags has a few tricks and wrinkles up his sleeve. For whatever reason, Gruden has gotten the best of him both games this season, but Spags has done pretty well this season outside of those 2 games, and even last year. He's got this ability to change his game plans week to week, give some different looks, throw in a couple wrinkles. It'll be interesting to see what he has for Tom
I can tell
Brady.
you who's not impressed by the Bucs offense. My dog, she's currently snoring up a storm, apparently. So that's how much she was impressed by what Tampa did offensively on Monday night. But to your point, talking about Spags, and I did want to ask you because you pay closer attention to this than just about anybody. Against the Raiders the first time around, Kansas City surrendered 5 plays of 44 yards or more. Last week, the longest play they gave up on Sunday Night Football was 29 yards, but they allowed Derek Carr to dink and dunk. How do you think they go about it? Do you think they play in a tight window and go, hey, Tom Brady, we're going to dare you to beat us over the top because we don't trust the deep ball? Because that secondary, like you've mentioned, is very good, but it's not perceived as such by the casual fan who watches the Chiefs and still lives by the mantra that, hey, look, this is offense first, and the defense is more or less an afterthought.
So, number one, give the Raiders all the credit in the world, and I think we've been praising them offensively. Gruden is fantastic scheming things up. Derek Carr right now is playing the best ball of his career. They have options to throw it short, whether it's Hunter Renfrow, who is one of the best route runners in football. You have Darren Waller, and then you do have the options over the top with Henry Ruggs and even Nelson Aguilar being a fantastic deep threat since he's come on there.
Did have a costly drop, though, against Kansas City. A ball he probably should have had when he slid down that could have changed the complexion of that outcome.
Yeah, I agree, and that's been his history, and he's had some drops, and that's why he's no longer in Philly. But I would say one of the best value signings of the entire offseason for $1 million. It'll be interesting to see what he commands on the open market this offseason. But in terms of Spags, I don't know what he's going to go with this week. I truly don't. I'm not, in the room devising these game plans, I think it's going to be a difficult task. I think probably the Bucs are going to be able to get the ground game going, even though that hasn't been an area where they've been overly fantastic. But if they do that, then it's going to make them really difficult to defend, because I do believe Brady is going to have success throwing the ball over the middle of the field here. The linebacker situation is really a spot that has been not the best for Kansas City's defense. They did go out and address it via the draft, kid from Mississippi State this year. So he's helped some things a little bit there, at least get more athletic, a little faster.
Willie
in that
Gay,
area.
baby.
I'm not sure what he's going to end up doing. Here, but I think he will have a couple wrinkles in the system, but there's a reason this total is getting pummeled over, and I think both offenses will have some success
When
here.
you look at the side on this game, you mentioned the total taking over money. I imagine you're going to see overwhelming public support in the Sunday afternoon time slot with Kansas City. 3.5, you think it's a fair price for where these two teams are at this current juncture in time?
Possibly, yeah. It'll be interesting to see how much higher it gets. That will be the million-dollar question, and at that point, what the position is. But we did see some initial support there at soft 3, where this opened a lot of places for Kansas City. But you mentioned this time slot. It's the 4:25 game,
standalone.
so it is kind of is that last game of the 4 o'clocks where we see the public come in trying to double up or try to get even. And this is the week, and we didn't really mention this, but we have in weeks past, where Thanksgiving week, a lot of recreational bettors come out in droves, more so than what you typically see in the weekend. And so sometimes waiting on the underdog that isn't receiving public support, you end up getting a little bit of a better number, because this is, specifically the NFL, is the one sport where the public has their say. Let me see what we made this game. You got me looking at my Excel sheet here. This makes for great podcasting.
It does.
I
imagine everyone goes, man, I hope these guys have silence here so Payne can look at his spreadsheet. We can hear Todd's dog snoring and a variety of other things going on to be able to make this happen.
So, yeah, number could be a touch high.
Gotcha. I was going to say, I mean, you look at some of the look-ahead numbers here. You know, I've seen anywhere from 2.5s to a soft 3, obviously, in the wake of Monday night's performance.
Yes.
You see a change, and we talk all the time until we're blue in the face about key numbers and how important it is, yada, yada, yada. So be interesting to see how high this price climbs and ultimately where the point de resistance starts to come in.
Yep, soft 3 is where I would have opened this.
Final game on the docket, a age-old rivalry in the NFC North between the Green Bay Packers and the Chicago Bears. Green Bay, of course, enters this game off a loss. Chicago comes in off a bye. I think I got that right. That's past my bedtime. Green Bay, an 8.5-point.
Past your bedtime?
Yeah, I mean, Payne, you get me up out of bed.
You're up at 10 o'clock.
You get me up in bed like at
Give me a
4:45 in the morning to record these podcasts. So I try to go to bed by 11. This is about the time where I start to, decompress, not think about football. But because I have to come out of my comfort zone so we can provide the best content, alas, here we are. Do you want to go on with this handicap, or do you want me to bitch and moan?
I was just going to let you keep going. I didn't want to interject there and end your wine party. Decompress starts at you're selling me on decompressing starting at what time?
10 o'clock, so I can go to bed by 11.
Oh my!
So I can be up around 4:45 or 5 in the morning most days.
It starts a little earlier than that.
Here we go. Yeah, you're right. I check out after dinner most nights at 6:30. Son of a bitch. Packers and Bears, going back to where we were before. Green Bay, an 8.5-point favorite at FanDuel. No total currently on the board, but we'll call the market consensus anywhere from 44.5 on the low end, upwards of 45. And Payne, this could be a big day for the Chicago Bears come Sunday night, because we could potentially have a return of Maserati Mitch back under center. How quickly Bears fans forget that before he was benched in the Atlanta Falcons comeback for the Chicago Bears, Mitch had compiled a 2-0 record, and so maybe with a healed-up shoulder, he can be the guy to take them to the promised land. But ultimately, it's not going to be the Bears' offense against the Green Bay Packers defense that'll decide it. It's what the Bears' defense can do to slow down Aaron Rodgers when you consider that these games in this long-storied rivalry have been historically low scoring. The last 5 games between these familiar foes, the winning team has scored just 24 points or less.
It's interesting. I did not know that. I like the fact that Matt Nagy is at least hiding behind the injuries and the bye week and just continually saying everything's on the table in terms of who's going to start at quarterback and who's going to call plays Sunday night. There's only, to your point, so much this Bears offense can do no matter who starts at quarterback or calls plays. So I think this does come down to Chicago's defense. Can they be a lockdown unit? They have to muddy this game up. The Bears defense, I think, needs to show that they're the strength and play to their 4th-ranked defensive efficiency rating. And it starts with some pressure. And I'll be candid. You have Khalil Mack. You sign Robert Quinn to big money. Akeem Hicks is a force on the inside. The Bears have struggled to get pressure. 24th in pressure rate. 25th in pass rush win rate. That's got to change Monday night. The way to hinder and beat the Packers is making Aaron Rodgers uncomfortable. Pressure, 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 pressure. You have to hit him. You have to bring him down to the ground. Green Bay's done a really good job protecting him. They're number 1 in pass block win rate. But if you look at some of these games, right, and you look at Rodgers' age, he's getting up there a little bit, 37 December. As Rodgers has gotten a little older, it's the less he likes pressure. And you can go back to the 49ers games last season. You can go back to the Week 6 game against the Buccaneers, and you've seen Tampa Bay really, turn him into someone that he is typically not. So the big-name guys up front for the Bears have to figure out how to get pressure. You're hoping that during the bye week, Chuck Pagano has devised some type of game plan or come up with some type of schemed pressures that Green Bay has not seen on film yet this season. Because if you look right now, Aaron Rodgers, 19th in passer rating among qualifying quarterbacks under pressure, 31st in adjusted completion percentage with the heat on. Even guys like Wentz and Goff have been better with their accuracy in those pressure situations. So I think if the Bears can make Rodgers a little bit uncomfortable, they'll have a fighting chance to cover this number.
Who hasn't struggled to create pressure? Former Chicago Bear Leonard Floyd.
Coming on, huh?
Sure is.
Brandon Staley has figured out a way to use him.
Little change of scenery has made him a lot more dynamic.
Isn't that his guy? There's a connection there because Brandon Staley was the outside linebackers coach in Chicago for 2 years.
Well, it makes sense that he went out and got his guy and put him in a position to thrive and excel, something that he didn't do as a member of the Bears. Did want to ask you, though, about the Bears' defensive injuries. Akeem Hicks wasn't able to finish the game last time we saw him. Any indication that he might not be 100%? And then, of course, Eddie Robinson placed on the COVID reserve list. I still imagine he'll be available on Sunday night, though.
It'll be interesting to see what's going on with the safety there. Hopefully he clears the protocol. You mentioned Akeem Hicks left the Vikings game with a hamstring injury. He was still on the sidelines, refused to see a trainer. Tough guy, division game. We'll see what comes of it. Obviously, we're recording this Tuesday night. Wednesday is typically the days where you'll start to see some guys return to practice, Thursday being the biggest day. So something certainly to monitor there. If he's out, we've seen what this defense is without him specifically stopping the run. The dichotomy of when he's in the game versus out of the game is a drastic difference. And we even saw it firsthand Thursday night.
Dalvin Cook.
Minnesota could not get going until Akeem Hicks departed the game. So that would be a certainly big loss for that Chicago Bears defensive line, which isn't overly deep.
One thing before we close the book on this game and a lot of the podcast, ultimately before we go to a best bet, what do you make of the Packers at this point? I mean, I know I've been overly critical, and a lot of people joke, Packer fans, but they look to me like an average football team that can have surprisingly great moments, and they can look surprisingly poor. And we saw some of that dichotomy on full display Sunday against the Colts. The first half, they look unstoppable. 28-14, they get the momentum score before the break. And then in the third quarter, they run 6 plays on offense, can't pick up a single first down, and they entered the day leading the NFL in time of possession, but they allowed the Colts to control the ball for over 35 minutes. And then you do see glimpses of that Packer offense again. They're pinned inside their 5-yard line. Rodgers takes in the length of the field, and we could say what we want about should he have spiked the ball or saved it down. Hey, look, I'm not out there. I'm not going to say anything. You only need a field goal, and that should be your primary focus. But they've looked as dynamic for stretches, then they look pedestrian at others. Is that what we're going to see, this inconsistency week in, week out from Green Bay like we've seen the last couple weeks?
Wasn't a big fan of Matt Eberflus's defensive scheme there on the 3rd and a mile to MVS.
It was a hell of a
Wasn't
catch.
quite
He
sure
dropped.
what that
To Rodgers'
defensive
credit, he did
alignment
drop
was.
the ball in the bucket 45 yards downfield between 3 Colts defenders.
He did. So Green Bay is what they are. They're a team with a great quarterback. The offense is in form and rhythm. Devontae Adams has the ankle issue that he's playing through. He still looks like he's very healthy. You're going to get Alan Lazard back this week. The offensive line's been protecting well. Got some nice running backs. It's a good offense with a really good quarterback. We've talked a little bit about Matt LaFleur not being able to adapt second half and make adjustments, and I don't know. The defense is really what the problem is. Mike Pettin, the scheme is very bad. You're not getting pressure this year. You went out last year, signed the Smith brothers. They're at least providing pressure. This year, they're not. And that's really the problem because neither of the Smith brothers are dedicated to setting the edge and stopping the run. And so you can run on Green Bay up the middle, to the side. It just really doesn't matter. And so you can control the game when you play Green Bay if you can get a couple key stops. And they struggle based upon this defensive formation where they only have 1 or 2 linebackers in the middle of the field. They become susceptible to running back and tight end passes. And we saw that in full display again against the Colts. So the system defensively isn't very good. The players haven't been playing as well, and you're getting absolutely no pressure. And that's really the problem. The defense is the glaring weakness to this team.
Makes sense. There's no doubt about it. When you look at the way certain teams have been on the ascent in the NFC, obviously the Rams are playing great football. We've seen the Saints defense operate at its full capacity over the last couple weeks. The Seahawks should ultimately get up to full speed. Green Bay probably a cup below, but you never want to step in front of Aaron Rodgers when he has a hot hand. Should make for an interesting playoff race in the NFC because I don't think you have a clear-cut number one. Maybe New Orleans, I guess, with Drew Brees healthy, but a lot to be decided there. You can follow Payne.
If I was looking at our tiers, right, KC is, if I'm looking at our tiers, like KC is the number 1 power rated team. And then you have this mix and match of Pittsburgh, Rams, Baltimore, New Orleans, Seattle, and Green Bay's in there along with Tampa, and that's basically the second tier, and the Colts are slightly behind that. But
blasphemy.
And,
Move the Colts
they're
up.
outside the top 5.
Put the Colts in that top
They're
tier with
outside the
Kansas
top
City.
5.
Let's go.
Yeah. Green Bay is what Green Bay is. There's certain things that give them trouble, and they can look like an average team if Rodgers is not in the mood and he's getting pressured. That's really it, because I don't think they have a defense right now, which is very good. Hopefully, they trend up. If you can get that defense to average, could start to trend up a little bit here.
Yeah, it's a little more dynamic, especially as they get some of their weapons healthy. And Marquez Valdes-Scantling continues to move forward and get rid of some of the Butterfingers. Ultimately, that worked out in our favor with that fumble in overtime. You can follow Payne on Twitter at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Fuhrman. You can follow me there. Most importantly, though, be sure to follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. And Payne, we've been rambling. We've done rants, but we still have one final piece of the puzzle to try and put together before we wish all of our loyal listeners a very happy Thanksgiving weekend and holiday. Where are we going, my friend, to find our best bet?
All right, let's go to the NFL. We'll go rotation number 263. Let's go with the Chargers-Bills over 53 points. Another NFL total over, Todd.
People are going to have you drug tested. Make sure that you are the real Payne Insider and not an imposter.
Yes. I think we have been a little bit higher on what the Chargers offense is, specifically when they are passing the football. And you would think that as aggressive as Daboll has been, Buffalo is going to get out to a little bit of a lead here. Going to force Anthony Lynn to be a little bit more willing of a passer. Just been much better and more efficient when you let Justin Herbert throw the football around. So we have been higher on the Chargers offense since the change, specifically after the bye, than I think a lot of other folks. We've actually even battled a couple other groups who have come in on these Chargers totals against us in the last few weeks. But We like this Buffalo over. I think the offensive line is going to get much healthier as well with the bye week. We saw, I believe it was the Week 10 injury report. Left tackle Cody Ford was a light practice Thursday and Friday. He should be back up to speed here, which would be a good get back for the Bills' offensive line. So I just like the matchups in this spot. And the total, just listen, based upon our number, we make this significantly higher. And that's what you're looking for on totals. And yeah, we like the matchups. Right? I can't go too far into detail.
No.
But,
don't peel back the curtain too far. But the one thing I do have to ask you, it is a home game in Western New York in November. The weather looked pretty favorable and conducive to us getting our points.
It certainly looked better today than it did Sunday evening. And I know initially we bet this game, and the thought process was the weather wasn't too bad, and we would monitor it throughout the course of the week. This morning, the weather is showing, and even this evening as we checked it before giving this out, the weather looks A-okay. 0% chance of rain at the time of this recording. Only 7-mile-per-hour winds and about 50 degrees. So weather appears to be A-okay here right now. I
believe that's what you like to call a beach day in Buffalo, right? That's your line?
Beach day in Buffalo, 50 degrees or better.
Oh, nothing like spending Thanksgiving weekend on the Great Lakes in Buffalo when it's 52 and slightly overcast or maybe a little bit of sun working in your favor.
Get the Anchor Bar wings going. It's a fine day.
Oh, Mike, I'm trying to think. I haven't spent much time in Buffalo by any stretch, but I did go to a Sabres game once. I've never been so cold walking from the Anchor Bar down to, I think, HSBC Arena with the wind whistling through there to see my beloved Rangers. But talk about a hardy fan base. Bills Mafia brings it every single week for their football team, and the Sabres fan, despite having a lousy product for the last handful of years, still continues to bring all sorts of energy and entertainment as well. Any words of advice, Payne, you want to share with our listeners about Thanksgiving sides, alcohol recommendations, overall life advice before I pepper you about the Miami Heat offering a max extension to your boy Bam Adebayo?
No, nothing too crazy. I'll probably have maybe a Tito's or two. I'm big mashed potato guy. It's the favorite side. Nothing too crazy for me.
Mashed potato guy.
Love a good mashed potato. Right. That's for sure. Also,
we got a little contest update, right?
We are doing the $300 Thanksgiving giveaway to our loyal listeners. Again, go to iTunes, leave a 5-star review and a nice little comment. If you've done that already, for whatever reason, every 4 to 6 months or so, the alg bots for Apple kicks in and you can leave another one and you'll populate to the top. So what we'll be doing is giving away $100 to 3 different people who leave these reviews. We'll announce those winners on Monday's show, so tune in there. And that's it. Little Thanksgiving giveaway for the loyal listeners. We got any merch left to sell for Black Friday for anybody who doesn't want to buy, TVs or, fancy electronics for their loved ones and just wants to gift them, Bet the Board t-shirt? There is some merch on the website. Believe we have a select few, limited supply of some Nike dry fit polo Bet the Board shirts. Very nice, actually. That's big time for those folks out there. You want to wear that Bet the Board swag, limited edition. Take full advantage. Makes the perfect gift for all your loved ones this holiday season. All right, buddy, this is the longest break we take from each other from a podcast purpose during the NFL season. 6 full days before we come back Monday morning to review what we saw over the weekend and, of course, do an in-depth preview of our favorite quarterback in the National Football League, Carson Wentz. Not going to lie. Hit the wall here a little bit towards the end as we trend towards 1:30 in the morning. You mentioned Carson Wentz. Oh, good God. Good God. We can save those rants for Monday. It'll give our listeners something to look forward to in the wake and aftermath of the holiday weekend. So for Payne Insider, follow him on Twitter at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Fuhrman. Follow me there. Most importantly, follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. Enjoy quality time with your friends, family, and loved ones. Be safe, be smart, and most importantly, be disciplined when it's an easy weekend to get reckless at the window. And with a Chargers ticket in hand come Sunday, we'll see you there.
Thanks for listening to Bet the Board. You can catch Todd and Payne every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday during football season, breaking down the biggest NFL and college football games. And to make sure you don't miss any free best bets, subscribe to Bet the Board on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.